Look at me. I'm in a hospital bed with tubes and pain. I can barely lift my head. I asked my granddaughter to turn on the camera because even so, I needed to speak. I won't take much longer because my body can't take it anymore. But what happened to me changed everything. My name is Alessandro. I'm Italian. I was born in Naples, and for many years I worked as an architect. I suffered a very serious accident. My heart stopped. And during that time when I was between life and death, I saw things that I can no longer keep to myself. Jesus showed me what is happening now in 2026 and sent me back with a single purpose, to warn you about the places that are marked. Because if you are in those places when the first great shaking comes, it will be very difficult to get out. Before the accident, I was a man who didn't believe in anything I couldn't measure or touch. An Italian architect trained in Rome, I worked on large projects throughout Europe, Brazil, and Mexico. My world was concrete, calculation, structure. Faith, for me, was something for people who need crutches to live. I lived well, earned well, and thought I understood how the world worked. I was proud of my work, my projects, my name. I never imagined that on an ordinary afternoon, driving through the city, a truck would run a red light and change everything. The impact was so violent that people passing by thought no one would survive. And for a few minutes, I really didn't. My heart stopped. And that's when it all began. When I left my body, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange calm I had never felt while awake. I saw my own body down below. The paramedics working, the wet asphalt, the shards of glass shining like diamonds on the ground. But that no longer held me. The sky around me had turned a color that doesn't exist in any paint in the world. A deep electric purple that pulsed as if it were alive. And then a voice that wasn't a voice, more like a vibration that went straight to my soul, called me by name. I turned around, and I was no longer on the street. I was in a space made of a clarity that revealed every wrong choice I had made in life. Every time I was arrogant. Every person I hurt without caring. Every time I listened to my conscience and ignored it. I saw it all at once, and it hurt in a way that no physical pain can reach. And then he appeared. I can't describe what I saw in human words because any words I use will fall short of the reality of that moment. It wasn't the Jesus of beautiful churches or famous paintings. It was a presence of such overwhelming authority and love that I fell to my knees, even though I didn't have physical knees in that place. He approached, didn't say anything with his mouth, but suddenly I understood everything. He showed me the globe, but not the blue and green planet from the photos. It was a planet covered by a network of red dots and thick shadow zones. And he told me, with a calmness that still makes me tremble when I remember it, "Son, look what's already happening in 2026. Many people are building their lives on sand without realizing that the ground will give way." The images began to flash before my eyes like bursts of fire. I saw Europe. I saw Brazil. I saw Mexico, Colombia, France, the United States. I saw cities that people today consider the dream of life turning into scenes of confusion and despair. I saw places full of famous and rich people being covered by a shadow that extinguished the light within them. And he explained to me that the greatest danger of 2026 doesn't come from what we can see with our eyes. It comes from what has been prepared in the shadows for decades. He told me that I would return to my body with a very clear mission, to tell what I saw, to name the places. Because whoever listens and understands will have time to get away before the first great sign appears in the sky of March 2026, right after the blood moon on March 3rd. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now from this hospital bed with my granddaughter holding the camera. And I can barely speak aloud. Because what Jesus showed me about what has already begun to move in 2026 is too specific for me to keep quiet. He showed me dates. He showed me places. He showed me what will happen in the cities that the whole world considers the pinnacle of civilization. He showed me the scenario that begins to unfold in March, right after the blood moon, and what that sign in the sky will unleash in the following months. Europe, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, France, the United States. All marked, all with a role in what is to come. And one by one, he explained to me why you need to understand what is happening in these places right now in 2026. Then he started showing me the places, not like a teacher in a classroom, like a father holding his son by the shoulder and pointing out the danger before he takes the wrong step. The first thing I saw was a vision of the great coastal cities. Cities that never sleep, full of neon lights, full of people running around without knowing where they're going. I saw New York. I saw parts of the Brazilian coast. I saw Lisbon. I saw Barcelona. But there was something different about them in 2026. The air was dense, charged with a static electricity that made people's skin crawl for no reason. And he explained to me that the first sign of places that need to be avoided is spiritual noise. Where the human ego has reached its maximum limit and the connection with God has been severed, that place becomes a whirlwind of emotional chaos. And those places are like that now. He showed me that starting in March 2026, right after the blood moon on the 3rd, places that depend entirely on technology and the digital financial system to survive will begin to flicker. These won't be technical failures. They will be signs that the protection over that structure is being gradually removed. He said it with a seriousness that made me tremble inside. It's not the water you need to fear first. It's the emptiness that will remain when what you consider safe disappears in a breath. And that's when he pointed to a specific city on the west coast of the United States, a place that has always been a symbol of dreams and fame. I saw a shadow walking through the avenues of that city. It wasn't a physical shadow. It was an absence of peace so radical that people simply started running without knowing where to go. Then he took me to see Europe. And what I saw in Europe weighed on me more than anything else. I saw regions that were the cradle of the Christian faith, now covered in a cold that wasn't winter. It was a cold of indifference, a cold of forgetting God. I saw ancient churches in France, Italy, and Germany transformed into museums, entertainment centers, and event spaces, and he told me with a sadness that I still feel in my heart when I remember. These places that were once my home are now empty shells. Don't seek shelter in the stone that has forgotten my name. And I, being Italian, who grew up surrounded by these ancient stones, felt that like a knife, because I knew exactly which stones he was talking about. Then he showed me Brazil. I saw the northeastern coast. I saw São Paulo. I saw Rio de Janeiro. I saw the sky over several Brazilian cities turn a rusty copper color. I smelled sulfur and burnt metal, a smell that wasn't physical, but that I felt with my soul. He took me south to the great forests and mountains, and for a moment I felt relief. But he stopped me. He showed me that even in nature, there are places that man has so defiled with dark rituals and greed that the earth itself will begin to expel whoever is there. He spoke to me of zones of silence that will be created in 2026, places where no communication will work and where darkness will have a temporary license to manifest itself. He told me, tell them to seek the heights. Not the heights of the mountains, the heights of prayer. I saw Mexico and Colombia being shaken by pressures coming from within and without at the same time. It wasn't just earthquakes or economic crises. It was something deeper. It was the result of decades of choices that went against the sacred. He showed me entire cities where divine protection was being withdrawn, not as punishment, but as a natural consequence of everything built on wrong foundations. And he explained that warning about these places isn't to sow fear. Fear belongs to the enemy. The warning comes from the Father. But soon after I felt I could breathe again, he showed me something that made me recoil in horror. I saw a date written in the sky over one of the most important cities in Europe, a date that coincides with a huge world event scheduled for 2026. And I saw that among the people celebrating walked figures that were not human. They were beings of ancient darkness that fed on noise and God's forgetfulness. What I saw happen in that place that the whole world is eager to visit in 2026 was so disturbing that I felt my physical body convulse here in the hospital. I understood that there are places that don't need to be avoided just because of natural disasters or economic crises. They need to be avoided because they will become open portals to something that humanity hasn't seen for millennia. My throat closed up when I tried to ask what we could do to stop it. And that's when he looked at me with a burning intensity and revealed the name of the first place on the blacklist. A place that millions of people consider sacred because of sports and culture, but which in 2026 will be the center of a revelation that will change the destiny of everyone present there. The stadium was enveloped in a roar that made the air vibrate. A tide of colors and flags waving under a sun that seemed too bright to be real. I recognized the flags of Mexico, the United States, Canada. I understood instantly that I was watching the 2026 World Cup, but not as a fan. I was seeing it from an angle that no camera in the world can capture. While the crowd shouted, celebrating what seemed to be a moment of global unity, he squeezed my hand, and the noise transformed. I stopped hearing shouts of joy. I began to hear a muffled lament, a low-frequency hum emanating from the chests of the thousands of people inside. And he told me with a sadness that pierced me deeply, look beneath the apparent joy, Alessandro, because that's the number one spot on the list. In 2026, the great mass gatherings won't be to celebrate life. They'll be to feed an invisible altar. What I saw then made me want to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I was forced to see the truth that the world will ignore. I saw that no wind was blowing over that crowd. A kind of gray energy network floated, connecting people's minds to one another without them realizing it. He explained to me that for this year, technology and the emotional state of humanity had created a fragility that had never existed before. He showed me that in the middle of a game, an inexplicable event would happen in the sky above the stadium. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was something that people would call a celestial vision or contact, a light so beautiful and seductive that millions would fall to their knees thinking that world peace had arrived. But he warned me firmly, not everything that glitters comes from my Father. In 2026, deception will dress itself in light to attract those who hunger for miracles but thirst for truth. It made me understand that these large stadiums and mass events need to be avoided because they will become experimental fields for a spiritual frequency that nullifies human will. As I watched, I saw men and women dressed in white with perfect faces, too symmetrical to be human, beginning to appear among the people. They walked through the crowd, spreading an artificial sense of calm. And he said, "I heard clearly, peace and security. Peace and security. But what they are planting is the forgetting of consciousness." That's when I understood that the danger in 2026 won't just be a bomb or a virus. It will be the total loss of spiritual identity in favor of a controlled collective mind. If you have ever felt a peace that doesn't seem natural in the middle of a crowd, write in the comments, because perhaps you are already feeling the signs of what is coming. My perspective shifted, taking me outside the stadium and into the streets of the cities that will host the games. I saw Monterrey, I saw Guadalajara, I saw Los Angeles and New York. In all of them, by mid-2026, there was a festive atmosphere that hid a rot beneath. He showed me that under the stadiums and convention centers, equipment was being installed that had nothing to do with data transmission, but with the emission of waves that affected people's nervous systems. He told me calmly, "Tell them that entertainment will be the Trojan horse, that they should seek the solitude of their rooms, that they should seek the silence of the fields, but that they should not be swayed by the trumpets of the world." I saw that many of these coastal cities, which are now the pride of modernity, will have closed zones in 2026 where things will happen that the press will not report. I felt small. A simple Italian architect who once thought stadiums were marvels of engineering. There, I saw them as cages of light. He showed me a map of the United States and Mexico and marked with fire points the routes people would use to get to these events. "These routes are traps," he told me. "In 2026, mass displacements will be used to census not only bodies but souls." I saw how facial recognition cameras weren't just looking for criminals, but reading people's vibrations, identifying those who still had a spark of spiritual resistance. Those who shone differently were marked in a database that didn't belong to any earthly government, but to that shadowy entity he had shown me before. I cried, asking why we couldn't simply stop all of this. He looked at me with a burning compassion and said, "Humanity chose this path when it traded the altar for the screen and my presence for applause. Only those who decide to distance themselves from the world's euphoria will find their way back home." At that moment, the vision of the stadium began to fade, but not to give me peace, to show me the second place on the blacklist. It suddenly took me to a region of Europe, a place full of history and ancient stones, where a treaty was being signed that the whole world celebrated as the end of all wars. I saw a long table made of a material that looked like gold but felt like ice. Around it, leaders of nations that had hated each other for centuries embraced and wept with joy. The whole world was connected by giant screens watching that moment. But he pointed me to the basement of that same building. And what I saw down there made me understand that the peace that man proclaims in 2026 will not be what it seems. The air suddenly turned cold. We were no longer in the stadium's bright lights, nor in the elegance of the Peace Dome. He took me to a desolate place, a desert where the wind howled among ruins that seemed to belong to a very near future. I saw buildings that hadn't even been built yet, already reduced to rubble. He made me understand that the distance between the stadium's celebration and this desolation was only a few months. He showed me that 2026 has a point of no return, a specific day in October when the mask will fall completely. I wanted to ask the exact date, but at that moment I saw something appear on the horizon that I can't describe in any other way than as a column of black fire rising from the earth towards the sky. He turned to me, and for the first time I saw in his eyes a gleam of holy fury, not a fury of hatred, a fury of zeal for all that is pure. He pointed to that column and told me that this was the result of what was happening in the third place that needed to be avoided. He grabbed my shoulders and forced me to look at a mountain on the border between two European countries, where a huge machine hummed with an intensity that tore through the fabric of reality. He told me with an urgency that made me vibrate inside. "Alessandro, what they're about to open there isn't a particle. It's a door they don't know how to close." I felt a terror that made me want to scream as I saw that from that crack in reality, shapeless shadows began to emerge, but with a hungry desire for light. I understood that 2026 won't just be a year of human crises. It will be the year of a silent invasion that begins at that exact point on the map. We were on the border between Switzerland and France, in front of the largest scientific complex in the world. And what I saw there made me understand that all the architecture I was so proud of in life was nothing compared to the engineering of the abyss that was being gestated beneath my feet. He remained by my side, and his presence was the only thing preventing my essence from dissolving into the terror emanating from those circular tunnels. I didn't look at that technology with admiration. I looked with profound sadness. The sadness of a father who sees his son playing with a venomous snake, thinking it's a colorful toy. He told me, and his voice echoed in the depths of the earth. What man seeks here is not knowledge, Alessandro. It's a key to a door that my father closed out of love for humanity, but which man's pride is determined to force open in 2026. I saw the white, aseptic underground corridors filled with men and women in lab coats walking with a cold, self-assured composure. They were brilliant minds, the brightest on the planet, but their eyes were clouded by a shadow they mistook for genius. He showed me that at the center of that collider, matter itself was being tortured. I saw the particles colliding, but I didn't see any scientific data. I saw small cracks opening in the fabric that protects our dimension. He explained that in 2026, these experiments will reach such a high frequency that the veil separating the physical world from the spiritual world will become as thin as wet paper. This is the third place they need to avoid, he warned me. Not only this complex, but all the cities that have become mirrors of this technological arrogance. What I saw emerging from those cracks had no human form. They were like pieces of liquid darkness, beings that do not belong to our time or our space, filtering through cables, fiber optic networks, the same electricity that powers our homes. If you feel that technology is stealing your peace, write, "I protect my soul" in the comments, because this emptiness is exactly the space that these shadows seek to occupy. Then he took me to a place that looked like a hospital, but it was so enormous that the corridors disappeared into the horizon. The smell was a mixture of antiseptic and something almost sickeningly sweet. I saw lines of people waiting with desperate hope in their eyes. He stopped at the door of a room that didn't use scalpels, but rays of violet light. He turned to me, and his voice took on a warning tone I had never heard before, a tone that made me understand that what I was about to see was the ultimate breaking point for the human race. Alessandro told me with a gravity that made the light around us dim, "Look closely at what man is willing to do to his own body to avoid meeting me. This is the place where my father's original plan will be challenged for the last time before my return." What I saw happen inside that room was so unnatural and profane that I felt the veil between my life and my death tear again. They weren't sick people seeking a cure. They were healthy people, young and old alike, waiting in silent lines to undergo what the world in 2026 will call holistic improvement. He looked at me with a sadness that seemed to melt the universe and told me in a voice that carried the weight of all the betrayals of history, "Son, look closely at what they're doing. They've stopped seeking eternal life in my spirit to seek a plastic eternity in my own blood. This is the fourth place they need to avoid at all costs, the life re-engineering centers." I saw a young man lying on a stretcher of light. Mechanical arms projected intense violet rays onto him. There was no scalpel, no blood. But inside, the bridges that connect our biology with the divine spark were being cut one by one. And he told me with a firmness that made the foundations of the building vibrate, "They've decided that peace can be manufactured with electrical impulses, and that my voice is a flaw in the system that needs to be corrected. Whoever hands their body over to these machines in 2026 will be handing over the ability to repent." He took me out of that hospital, and we were back in the mountains, but this time the air smelled of an approaching storm. He pointed to the horizon, where the lights of a city shone with a feverish intensity. He told me that we had already seen the deception of science and the deception of peace, but now he needed to show me the place that would become the center of the greatest spiritual catastrophe before 2026 ended. A place that everyone loves, a place of history, but which will be the stage for a desecration that will darken the very sky with pain. Alessandro told me, as the wind began to roar with supernatural force, "Prepare to see the city of seven hills, because in 2026, what will come out of its temples will not be incense. It will be the smoke of a betrayal prepared for centuries." And I, an Italian, born a few kilometers from Rome, felt those words pierce me like a sword of ice. The Rome I saw was not the Rome of art books or postcards I analyzed during my years studying architecture. It was a city shrouded in a crimson mist where the ancient stones seemed to sweat a coldness that didn't come from the climate, but from a betrayal simmering in the shadows for generations. He led me down not the physical stairs, but through the layers of time until I reached the base of the great basilica. "Alessandro, look at the foundations," he told me in a voice like thunder contained in a whisper. As an architect, my first instinct was to look for cracks in the marble, but what I saw was far worse. Beneath the main altar, the foundations of faith were being replaced by fiber optic cables and symbols that had nothing to do with the cross. In May 2026, this place will be the stage for what the world will call the Great Pact of Universal Brotherhood. I saw leaders of all religions holding hands beneath the dome that was once designed for the glory of God. But above their heads, I did not see the Holy Spirit descending. I saw that same gray netting from the stadiums, now much denser and much darker. He showed me that in the name of peace and the survival of humanity in the face of the crises of 2026, a new doctrine would be proclaimed. A doctrine that said all paths are equal and that truth is relative to collective well-being. He stopped in front of a statue of a saint that seemed to weep tears of black oil. And he told me with infinite sadness, they sold my inheritance for a place at the table of the powerful. In 2026, whoever seeks my face in these temples will find a void that will consume their peace. He made me understand that avoiding these places is not rebellion, it's preservation. He showed me that the temples that join this global religion will become centers for collecting spiritual data, where confession will be replaced by psychological analysis by artificial intelligence to identify those who resist the system. If you have ever felt a cold emptiness in your chest upon entering a church that should be your home, write, "I seek the truth," in the comments, because what you're feeling is real and has a name. What scared me most was seeing what will happen on June 15th, 2026, a large square full of people from all nations. In the center, a modern altar without sacred images, but with a holographic screen emitting a seductive golden light. From the screen emerged a figure radiating a false peace, a beauty that made you want to kneel instantly. The whole world was on its knees through their devices. He squeezed my hand so hard that I felt my essence merge with his for a moment. "This is the place of abomination," he whispered. I saw how a frequency emanated from that altar, sealing people's minds and erasing their ability to distinguish good from evil. It made me see that avoiding these places means returning to what he called the desert church. Small houses, humble basements, clearings in the woods where 2 or 3 gathered in his name. The network of 2026 could not penetrate these places. "This is where I'm going to live in 2026, he told me, with a smile that brought me back to life for a moment. And then came the moment I least expected. He took me to a space of pure light where, in the center, there was an empty throne emitting the sound of rushing water. He told me he had already shown me the physical places that need to be avoided, the stadiums of noise, the centers of diplomatic power, the laboratories of profane science, the temples of treacherous religion, and the shores of complacency where the sea will reclaim what man stole from peace on October 13th, 2026. But before returning me to my body, before the doctors could resuscitate me in that emergency room, he needed to show me the place of all places. He took me in front of a huge door made of solid light. Above it were no words. There was a feeling of eternity that made me understand my own insignificance. And for the first time, I saw in him not only the master and the savior, but the king who comes to reclaim what is his. Suddenly, the peace of that place was interrupted by a violent electric shock that shook me completely. I saw in the distance, as if through a long tunnel, the emergency room where my physical body lay. I saw the sweaty doctors with the defibrillator paddles, shouting numbers that made no sense to me. He looked at me with a smile that was both a farewell and a promise. "Go, Alessandro. Tell them what you saw. They won't believe you at first. They'll call you crazy. They'll say the brain projects images when you die. But when 2026 begins to unfold, your words will be a beacon for many." I felt a free fall, an emptiness in my stomach that made me choke. The weight of my physical body hit me as if a mountain of lead had been thrown on top of me. The pain returned all at once. Broken ribs, a throbbing head, a burning chest. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw were the cold, white lights of the hospital. I heard the beep of the heart monitor and a nurse's cry. "It's back. We have a pulse." This concludes what I came to tell you. I'm in this bed, tired, in pain, with my granddaughter holding the camera with trembling hands. But I leave here different from how I entered. I'm no longer the Italian architect who built buildings for the glory of men. I am a messenger of what I saw. I warn you with the love of one who has seen death up close. Stay away from mass gatherings. Stay away from technology that tries to rewrite who you are. Stay away from churches that have forgotten the name of their owner, and seek the silence of the Spirit. March 2026 has already begun to move. The blood moon of March 3rd was the sign. What comes after that, I saw in every detail. And the decision is now yours. There is one last image that I haven't shared yet. A vision that Jesus gave me before the defibrillator brought me back. I saw a person who is watching this video right now, and I saw a tear running down her face as she understood that her entire life was a preparation for this moment. If that person is you, he knows you by name. And this warning is his last gesture of love before the veil is completely torn.